The car was an eyesore by every definition of the word. Rust clung to its frame like a second skin, peeling paint flaked off with the lightest touch, and the trunk sat crooked, as though years of neglect had finally pulled it out of alignment. The windows bore long, jagged cracks like scars from a life lived too hard, and the flat tires seemed to sigh under the weight of time itself. To anyone else, it was nothing more than scrap metal waiting for the junkyard. But to the dozen children huddled together on the driveway, eyes darting nervously between each other and their father, it was more than just a care-up, it was a gift. The man stood there in silence, his tall frame casting a shadow over the driveway. His eyes narrowed as he took in the state of the vehicle, and his lips parted slightly, though no words came out at first. He wasn't angry, not at all, but there was a clear question written on his face: why this car? His youngest son tugged at his shirt, eyes wide with anticipation. "It's for you, Dad." The man's breath caught in his throat. He glanced down at the small boy, then back at the line of children gathered together, all of them clutching one another as if bracing for disappointment. The clothes didn't quite match, as some jeans were too long, some shoes too tight, shirts with frayed collars and mismatched buttons, but they had worked hard to look presentable for this moment. "Their gift for me?" he asked softly, his deep voice rough around the edges. The oldest girl, a teenager with her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, stepped forward. She clutched her hands together nervously. "We broken bar we saved up, from chores, from helping out at the neighbors' places. Some of us even picked up cans and bottles from the park. We wanted to get you something special, Dad, something that's just for you." The man blinked rapidly. His chest tightened as he looked at each child, from the youngest, who was barely 6, to the oldest, who had just turned 15. They stood in a crooked line, their arms linked, their small bodies pressed together like they were holding one another up. He could see the pride in their eyes, but also the fear that he might reject their gift, that he might see only the broken-down car instead of the love behind it. He crouched down to meet their eyes. "But why this old car?" he asked gently, not out of criticism but out of genuine curiosity. The children glanced at each other, unsure of who should answer. Finally, the second youngest, a little girl with curly hair, piped up. "Because you always give us everything. You never buy stuff for yourself. You just fix our bikes, patch our clothes, and cook for us. We thought a broken bar, maybe if you had a car, you'd finally have something just for you." Another child, a boy with freckles and dirt still clinging to his shoes, added quickly, "We couldn't afford a nice one, but we thought maybe you could fix it up. You're good at fixing things, Dad." The man's throat tightened, and he swallowed hard, blinking away the sting in his eyes. They thought he deserved something. They thought of him not as the man who had simply given them a roof and meals, but as their dad. And though the car was battered, ugly, and barely standing, the love behind it made it more beautiful than the finest vehicle he had ever seen. He reached out, pulling the nearest few children into his arms, and soon the entire group pressed in around him, a cluster of warmth and small arms wrapping tightly around his waist. He held them close, resting his chin on the top of one child's head. "You didn't have to do this," he whispered, his voice thick. "But we wanted to," the oldest girl said firmly. "You're always giving us second chances. We thought maybe it's time someone gave you one." The words struck him harder than anything else could have. A second chance. That's what he had promised them when he signed those adoption papers, when he brought them home one by one. None of these children had known what it meant to have a stable family, but together, they had created something real. And now, they were giving him something back. Something that symbolized not just gratitude but trust. He pulled back just enough to look at the car again. To anyone else, it was a wreck. To him, it was proof. Proof that love wasn't measured in the shine of chrome or the strength of an engine, but in the thought behind every action, in the way little hands worked tirelessly to save pennies and dimes for months just to make him smile. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice breaking into a smile. "This is the best gift I've ever been given." The children beamed, their nervousness melting into relief. A few of them laughed, the kind of laughter that only comes when love has been affirmed. The man straightened up, wiping at the corner of his eye as he placed a hand on the car's roof. It was rough under his palm, the metal flaking, but in that moment, He imagined what it could become: a project, a challenge, a symbol. The youngest tugged his sleeve again. "Do you like it, Dad?" He crouched down once more and kissed the child's forehead. "I don't just like it, I love it, because it came from you." And with that, the old, broken-down car was no longer just a pile of rust and steel. It became a vessel of love, hope, and a promise that no matter how hard things looked on the outside, what truly mattered was the strength within. That evening, after the children had gone inside to prepare dinner, clattering pots and pans filling the small kitchen with cheerful noise, the man lingered outside with the car. The sky above had turned a deep orange, fading into purple, and the air carried that cool, almost fragile stillness that comes before night settles in. He ran his hand along the cracked roof of the sedan, the rust rough beneath his fingers. Despite its battered state, he felt a strange pull, as though the car was waiting for him to discover something it had held onto for far too long. He pulled open the driver's door, the hinges groaned in protest, and the smell of duster and old leather hit him immediately. The seat was torn, the stuffing spilling out like the insides of a worn pillow. He slid inside carefully, the spring squeaking under his weight, and laid his hands on the steering wheel. It was stiff, the rubber cracked, but as his fingers traced its outline, he imagined what it must have been like when it was new, someone proud to own it, someone excited to take it on the open road. He let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "What have these kids gotten me into?" Still, he leaned forward, brushing away dust from the dashboard. As he did, something rattled inside the panel. Frowning, he taped it again, and the sound repeated, a hollow knock. Curious now, he pressed harder, and the brittle plastic cover popped loose. A small, metal box tumbled out, landing heavily on the floor by his feet. His brows knit together as he bent down to pick it up. The box was old, its surface tarnished but sturdy, the kind made to last. He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of it in his hands, before unlatching the small clasp. The lid creaked open, and inside, nestled neatly, were folded letters tied with string, a handful of black and white photographs, and at the very bottom a stack of official-looking papers. His breath caught as he lifted the photographs. Faces stared back at him, frozen in time. Families standing proudly beside the very car he now sat in. Children laughing in front of the same porch that stood behind his own house. The background looked almost identical, though fresher, newer, as if time had simply layered years upon the same soil. Carefully, he set the photos aside and picked up the bundle of letters. The handwriting was delicate, looping, the kind that belonged to another generation. He unfolded one, the ink faded but still legible. "To whomever finds this," it began, "if you are reading these words, then know that this car was more than metal to us. It carried us through joy and hardship, across states and storms. But the greatest treasure we leave behind is not the car itself, it is the home tied to it. We hope it finds a family who will love it as much as we did." The man's eyes widened. He pulled the official papers from the bottom of the box, hands trembling. His eyes scanned the words, "Deed of property." He blinked, reading again to be sure. The address printed in bold letters was the very same address of the house he and his children were renting, of the little Warren home they had worked so hard to keep. Except now, the deed named the car's owner a broken bar, and underlined at the bottom, it stated that possession of the car transferred not just ownership of the vehicle, but the house itself. His heart pounded in his chest. His hands shook so badly he had to set the papers down for fear he might tear them. He leaned back into the seat, breathless, staring at the box as though it might vanish if he looked away. The housey broken bar hours. Tears welled up in his eyes. For years, he had worried about rent, about scrapping together enough money to keep the roof over their heads. Every month was a battle. He had taken odd jobs, skipped meals, and sacrificed his own needs just to make sure the children never went without. Now, in the most unexpected way, the burden had been lifted. A car bought with the love and sacrifice of 12 children had delivered not just a project for his hands, but a foundation for their future. He closed the box gently, clutching it to his chest, and sat there for a long time. Memories of every moment flashed before him, picking up each child from the adoption agency, holding their trembling hands as they walked into a new life, promising them that no matter what, he would be their dad. He had given them a home in his heart, But now, through some miracle, they had given him a home in the truest sense of the word. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Dad." He looked up to see the oldest girl standing in the doorway, the light from inside spilling around her. "Dinner's ready. Are you coming in?" He nodded, quickly brushing out his eyes so she wouldn't see. Then, almost without thinking, he held up the metal box. "Sweetheart, I found something." "Something?" "A broken bar." "Incredible." Her brow furrowed, and she stepped closer. "What is it?" He smiled through his tears, his voice shaking. "It's our future." Later that night, with all 12 children gathered around the worn dining table, he laid out the photographs, the letters, and finally the deed. Gasps filled the room. Little hands reached out to touch the papers, as though afraid they might disappear. "So broken bar, this means we don't have to move?" one boy asked hesitantly. The man's voice broke as he answered, "It means this house is ours, forever." The room erupted with joyous shouts, laughter, even a few tears. Children clambered into his lap, hugged his neck, clung to his arms. The oldest girl whispered, "See, Dad, we told you this car was special." And in that moment, surrounded by the love of 12 children who had once been strangers but were now bound together as family, he realized the truth. The car hadn't been broken down at all. It had simply been waiting for the right hands, the right hearts, and the right family to unlock the treasure hidden inside.